Welcome, everyone. I see the number of participants is climbing rapidly. We're going to wait a few minutes before we officially start, just to make sure as many people join as can. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I think I will give one more minute before we start. People I see are still joining. We're up to 69 participants now, which is exciting. So welcome. All right. Well, as we are 5 minutes past the start time, let me officially start the webinar. Thank you very much, all of you, for coming. My name is Karen Hain. I'm the Managing Director of Bonstar Consulting. I'm on the European Board of the Faith to Action Network, and I'm a member of the FP 2030 Faith and Family Planning Working Group. And I've been following the questions of faith and family planning and SRHR for almost 15 years now. So I welcome you. Glad you're here. Also, thank you very much to FP 2030 for hosting this event and the excellent job they've done in organizing the webinar. It's much appreciated. I'd like to thank the speakers before I start, just to say the expertise. We're really lucky to have such distinguished speakers, and to have your expertise and time available for this webinar is very much appreciated by us all. And thanks to everyone for joining. We had a tremendous expression of interest in this webinar. 579 people registered. We don't expect to get that many participating actively. I suspect that many, as I often do, will register for a webinar, even if they're not able to attend, so that they can see the recording afterwards. So this information will be quite widespread. So for our next slide, please. Thank you. Everyone should select their language. To select the language, there's a globe icon at the bottom of the screen, and this will take you to the English or French channel. If you're using French, you can mute the original audio, so there's no conflict between the interpretation and the spoken word from the panelists. But every single person who's participating should select a language so that you can hear all of the speakers. Donc, pour obtenir une traduction, vous devez cliquer sur l'icône du globe en bas de l'écran.
So in order to get interpretation, you have to click in the bottom of your screen.
Vous pouvez ensuite couper le son original. Tout le monde doit sélectionner une langue afin de pouvoir écouter tous nos intervenants. And with that, I will not continue in French because by now you should be able to click the globe icon and choose your language for translation. In addition, you can select whether or not you would like to read captions during the session. You should see these captions automatically, but if not, you can select them by clicking on the icon with the 2 C's. If you wish to hide the captions later, please select the same icon again and select Hide Subtitle from the menu that appears. The captions are generated using an automatic feature in Zoom, which means they might not be 100% accurate, and they will be available only in English for now. We are recording the session so that the presentations can be available for everyone who registered after the webinar is over. So to get started, let me tell you how the next hour and 20 minutes or so is going to flow. We first have opening remarks by Dr. Sheila Macharia. She's Managing Director of the FP 2030 Hub for East and Southern Africa. Then we will have, and she'll set the stage for our discussion. Then we'll have a question and answer, a question that I will submit to each of our 3 panelists and allow them to respond. And as you think of questions during the presentations, please mark them in the chat box, and then we'll take a full question and answer session from all participants after the speakers have finished. And so with this, I'm happy to turn the mic over to Dr. Sheila Macharia. Sheila? Oh. I didn't mention the objectives, I'm sorry. If you want, I can go back and remind everyone what the objectives are today, which you may have seen also in the announcement for the webinar. We will share interfaith policy and advocacy approaches and best practices among faith actors in Eastern and Southern Africa to foster meaningful engagement of faith actors in driving progress towards family planning goals. We hope to facilitate knowledge sharing and learning exchanges of existing projects, best practices, emerging issues, data tools, and trends to encourage adaptation of projects and resources to different contexts and add to the field of faith and family planning. And last, but by no means least, to open a dialogue between and among faith leaders and family planning advocates to bridge knowledge gaps. And now, Dr. Macharia.
Thank you very much, Karen, for that introduction. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege to participate in this webinar today as we share lessons and reflections on interfaith policy and advocacy approaches that can drive progress towards FP goals. As many of you know, FP 2030 is a global partnership dedicated to ensuring that people everywhere have the right to access family planning. This partnership, which includes governments, civil society, youth-led organizations, faith actors, private sector, development partners, amongst others, seeks to advance the recognition of family planning as an essential ingredient for sustainable development. FP 2030 now has a new decentralized structure comprising 5 regional hubs. This has provided an opportunity for closer interactions with countries and an appreciation of the various contexts that define different country plans and processes. I lead the East and Southern African Regional Hub, based in Nairobi, Kenya, which oversees 25 countries. The other hubs are the North, West, and Central Africa Hub in Abuja, Latin America and Caribbean Hub in Panama City, Asia and Pacific Hub in Kuala Lumpur, and the North America and European Hub in Washington, D.C. As we have had initial meetings and visits to different countries in East and Southern Africa, we have been really impressed with the dedication and focus of the focal representatives led by government who have developed and continued to monitor their country commitments. FP 2030 partnership provides a unique opportunity for a wide variety of partners to rally around a common vision. We define the vision in this way: working together for a future where all women and adolescent girls everywhere have the freedom and ability to access and make their own informed choices and decisions about using modern contraception, and when or when to have children, to lead healthy lives and participate as equals in society and its development. Many of the changes needed to increase the momentum for family planning require a variety of voices speaking together to influence policymaking, financial decision-making, program planning, society norms, amongst others. We recognize the unique position that faith actors hold in this regard. And so we are very excited to have this opportunity to consider how we can work collectively to achieve more for our countries and for the different regions. From being a significant voice in the community to engagement with governments and even the political arena, we strongly believe that faith actors can contribute significantly to a country's development agenda. We have seen this in many countries when various laws are changed. Faith actors have contributed to ensuring the reflection of the citizens' voice in the new laws. In the health sector, and particularly in family planning, we need the power of the faith actors in advocacy and policy making, not in the background, but front and center. At this significant time, in the East and Southern African region, when governments are establishing policies for universal health coverage, including primary health care, grappling to allocate resources efficiently to all development sectors, refining policies and plans for the ever-growing population, we need the voices of faith actors nationally and regionally. There are barriers in the family planning sector that need to be removed and opportunities that need to be tapped. This is a chance for effective partnership and advocacy actions. So we all agree that faith actors have the potential to engage and be a significant influence. And as we continue to grow our partnership in this region of East and Southern Africa, the conversations today will help us identify the best ways and forums to achieve a powerful effect. Thank you very much. And sorry, I didn't open my video so that you could see me, but it's all right, I think. Thank you very much, Karen. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Mataria, for those remarks. You're absolutely right. And I'm sure we all share those views. So thank you so much. And it's true, we would have loved to have seen your face, but it's okay.
Yes.
So let me now take a moment to first mention this is the first of a three-part dialogue series. We've already mentioned the goal of today's session. So let me now introduce our speakers today. We have with us James Mullally, who's a consultant and executive secretary of the Abundant Life Network, Howard Kasia with the Evangelical Association of Malawi, and Jackie Katana, executive director of the Faith for Family Health Initiative. Thank you very much. If we were in person, we would all give you a big round of applause. Thank you for your expertise, your commitment to these issues, and for your time today. So with the first question I have is for everyone, all of our panelists. And so I would like to ask you all to please share with us one example of successful policy and advocacy engagements or actions in your country towards the FP 2020 or FP 2030 commitments. As you do this, highlight what you find to be the strategy or approach that was key to success. And I ask you, of course, to be concise and direct. Thank you very much. Shall we start with Howard? Would you like to go first?
Thank you so much. Allow me to start by saying Evangelical Association of Malawi is an umbrella organization for 72 denominations and 58 faith-based organizations. And the denominations are comprised of the evangelicals, Pentecostals, Protestants, but also the prophetic ministries. We started doing this work in 2011, and the advocacy we are doing is both internal, looking within ourselves, and external, looking to our partners, including government. And one example, which I can say by now, it is a record, is the fact that we've been able to ensure that we are bringing the issues and information and messages into the church and also mosques by developing faith-based sexual and reproductive health, which religious leaders are using now in their churches and the mosques. But we have also considering the adolescents and the young people we have in the church and mosques. We have also developed a comprehensive sexuality education teaching guide, which the youth in the church and the youth in the mosques are using to ensure that they are getting the information on SRH, which also helping them to make decisions on accessing various services of sexual and reproductive health, including information and any other methods that they would want to use. On the government side, one of the biggest achievement we've had is to discuss and ensure that we are bringing the SRHR services closer to the people. As a church in conjunction with others, we have opened safe spaces in the communities, but also in the church, where service providers are providing their services, reaching out to the youth. We have also enabled that the service providers that are targeting the youth, they are also using the youth themselves, which is the biggest strategy that we have used in reaching out a huge amount of youth and adolescents with information, but also other services. So bringing the information into the churches in their own language, keeping their norms and values, and also engaging with the government is one of the things that the Evangelical Association of Malawi has really done and is continuing to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Howard. And Jackie, would you like to present your successful approaches and talking a little bit about what you found most important for those?
Thank you so much. Our approaches and successes were mainly into the policy and financing, and they stretch from 2016 to date. From 2016 to 2020, the interfaith community collaborating with other partners, but leading mainly in the 8 districts, they were able to develop 8 district-costed implementation plans. And these engagements were led by the faith leaders themselves, but they brought on board other partners, and the resources were provided also through the Interfaith Faith Fund, through PAI. And through that, in the 8 districts between 2016 to 2020, we were able to get $250 an equivalent allocated to family planning from the domestic resources or the government through engagements with the stakeholders, participating in the budget conferences and engaging with the political wing, that is the national level, the members of parliament, and the district level the political leaders, which I will again explain how we've adopted that approach to a higher level. And in scaling up that, in 2021 to 2023 to date, we received funding from USAID, and we are working in 11 districts. Again, using the interfaith approach, collaborating with other partners, we've been able to ensure that more district-hosted implementation plans are reviewed, especially those that had expired, but also those districts that did not have the costed implementation plans, they are developed. And so far to date, $10,000 has been allocated from the domestic finances, and our religious leaders continue to engage. Even right now, as we speak, they're engaging at the district level, participating in the budget conferences. And we formed different champion building, including the interfaith leaders, but also very specifically for this project, led by the interfaith leaders. We've also formed what we call the family planning political caucuses. At the parliament level, we have 11 MPs from different committees who are working as champions beyond the budget, finance, and health, the usual business decision makers that we engage. And then at the subnational level, we have the local council 5, the political leaders of the 11 districts. They also came up with a committee, and we called it a district family planning political caucus. So we've been able to use those approaches, but on top of that, we've used capacity building. Most of this has been through using the smart advocacy approach. By then it was called the AFP, Advanced Family Planning. Now it's a smart advocacy approach. But also very key is evidence generation. We start with getting to know the financing landscape, doing studies so that we get to know the ecosystem and also the baseline which we use through dialogues and working with other partners or actors to engage with our decision maker. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Jackie. Thanks very much. James, would you like to answer that question and turn on your camera if you're able to? As a reminder, the question is, please share an example of successful policy engagement and what has been most important for its success. Thank you. We're having trouble hearing you. I'm sorry, James, we can't hear you. Yeah, unfortunately, we may need to try without your camera. Can you speak now? And let's see.
Hello. Can you hear me?
James, we can just barely hear you. I don't think your mic is muted because you're there. But if you're on the phone, you might need, that does it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think it was the camera because I'm using the phone. So here I am, and I'd like to say that Abundant Life Communication and Broadcasting Network, in short, Abundant Life Network, is a faith-based organization that became the pioneer in family planning advocacy for religious organizations in Tanzania using the SMART approach. We were funded by Population Action International in 2016 to do two things. Number one, to build the capacity of religious leaders in advocating for family planning, and we used an interfaith approach, and we are able to reach out to all major religious organizations in Tanzania and build their capacities by bringing representatives who attended the sessions. And then with that, we also engaged Dar es Salaam region to develop a costed implementation plan that would cover its 5 municipal councils where budgets are made at subnational level, and use it to coordinate stakeholders and ensure that budgets for family planning are allocated every year. And we succeeded in that. And the approach we used, just like Jackie in Uganda, we also used the SMART approach, which is a very effective tool that helps us engage decision makers in a focused way and a very targeted way, and ensure that they are not threatened, but rather collaboratively work with them to develop whatever we present to them after getting their buy-in. So we approached the leadership in Dar es Salaam region and we presented the agenda. It was supported, and after that, we were given the chance to work with their technical teams to develop the CIP for the region. And we went on to the process of developing the CIP. And after it was completed, it was a time when there was high resistance for family planning at the top level in Tanzania. So the CIP was completed, but it was not publicly launched, but it was very instrumental in pushing family planning interventions in the region, because we saw the region having a lot of success in terms of its councils, the municipal councils, increasing budgets for family planning every year and ensuring that family planning interventions are well funded and implemented. But as a faith-based organization, we didn't end with that. Using the SMART approach and using the connections that we obtained, we worked with other stakeholders, including the Advanced Family Planning Project and the Kenya Muslim Youth Organization in Kenya that came along with us, and we were able to engage the leaders of the Supreme Councils of Muslims in Tanzania. There are two. There's one for Tanzania mainland, and there's one for Zanzibar. And we engaged each of them separately, worked with their scholars, Muslim scholars, to develop fatwas, which are statements in support of family planning for the rights and health of women and children. And the fatwas have been very, very helpful in getting support of Muslim communities in family planning. And for the Christians, they had already developed such statements. So those whom we have been working with, which include all the main denominations, the Catholics and the Protestants and the Pentecostals, where Abundant Life Network comes from, have all been working supportively to accelerate family planning advocacy and interventions in Tanzania. And we are looking forward that in these coming years of the FP 2030, these stakeholders will continue to work closely with other stakeholders to make sure that the targets of the FP 2030 are met, and as well as country targets are met. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. That's very helpful. I can see some common threads coming out, and we'll talk about those in the end, but common threads among all the presentations. Thank you, James. And James, maybe I'll stay with you and just ask, have you also, I didn't hear how you ensured interfaith religion. Well, I guess you talked about the fatwa and the faith leader statements from the Christian side as well. Can you talk a little bit more about how you ensured their meaningful engagement?
Thank you very much. For this part of the work to ensure meaningful engagement of interfaith religious leaders, we made sure that, first of all, we used structures that are existing. And we learned at the beginning that there was an inter-religious organization that was connecting all the religious bodies in the country. This is called Tanzania Interfaith Partnership. Its members include the Christian Council of Tanzania, CCT, which is the country level body under the World Council of Churches, the Supreme Council of Muslims in Tanzania, the Episcopal Conference of Tanzania, which is the national body for the Catholics, and the Office of the Grand Mufti of Tanzania. These are linked together and connected by Tanzania Interfaith Partnership. So when we wanted to reach them, this body, TIP, became the connecting link. All invitations and communications went through this, and coordination was much, much easier because it is trusted, and with communication from them, we were also easily trusted. We are coming from the Pentecostal side. So there is another body which is not part of TIP. It is called the Council of Pentecostal Churches in Tanzania. And for this, because I come from there, I was able to connect easily and get them involved. Now, very important things that ensured that there's meaningful engagement were, first of all, to make sure that there is trust between us and them, because this matters a lot. And to build that trust, we ensured that we respect their values. And we worked with them in a very consultative manner, in understanding that they are very influential. They have a lot of knowledge about many things. They have also institutions, including hospitals, and they have research bodies and a lot of other things. So we had to use a very consultative approach, which synthesized that trust. And for that reason, there was a lot of buy-in and friendship building and strengthening of the networks. And up to this moment, we are still working together collectively. And whenever we meet, even in other functions, we are very, very happy and very trusted partners.
Super, that's very helpful. And I love the expression friendship building. I think we can all use that in probably most aspects of our life, a bit more friendship building and less alienation. Thank you, James. Jackie, no, excuse me. I'm going to ask Howard a question, if I may. Sorry, Jackie, didn't mean to confuse you there. Howard, what would you say are some meaningful strategies to address the barriers and challenges to meaningful engagement? And if your camera works, please turn it on.
Thank you so much. Let me begin by saying that sometimes doing a good job is an advocacy on its own. Evangelical Session of Malawi, through the Norwegian Church and Dan Church, has been able to get access to funding from KfW, but also recently through a consortium that is being championed by Palladium in Malawi, we've been able to join the Momentum project being funded by USAID. But I think one of the biggest challenge that faith organizations are facing in Malawi is a lack of access to resources. There aren't so many partners that are able or want or willing to reach out to the faith groups in Malawi and be involved as the partner actors in the issues of sexual and reproductive health. They may have their own reasons, but that's one of the biggest challenges that the faith community, including Evangelical Session of Malawi, despite the, apart from these sources that I've mentioned, that are facing in order to participate actively and also fully as in the sexualship. But one of the ways to really address these issues is to continuously collaborate and work together with the government, even if they may or they may not give you some funds. Make the voices of the faith community known to the government. Let what the activities and the best and potentials that faith communities can have, let it be known to the partners, but also to government. I know that through the Christian Health Association of Malawi, CHAM, the faith community is providing a lot of, mostly 40% of the health services to the rural masses. But really, I cannot really say more words, but saying struggling, because that access to resources is one of the problems. But also, I think the other is planning without the consultation or full consultation of the faith community. It really requires the faith community to consult more in order to get things done and be involved. But I think those two areas are the challenges lack of access to resources, but also lack of active consultation. But as I'm saying, I think one of the strategies that we have used is continuous consultation and making our voices known and our actions and work known to the partners, including government. Finishing the same words, doing a good job is in itself an advocacy.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And now, Jackie, what would you say are some of the best practices and lessons learned that you have found important for having a real impact? You described some of the impact that you've had in terms of leveraging resources, getting the government to implement funds in its budget. What would you say are key best practices and lessons learned that maybe others can replicate for having an impact like this?
Thank you so much, Karen. I'll start from what Reverend James talked about. That is the interfaith building, but bring in the Ugandan perspective. So in Uganda, we've had this interfaith approach run from national to sub-national level. We have the most eminent religious leaders as family planning champions, and they are part of the leadership of Faith for Family Health Initiative, including the Archbishop, the Deputy Mufti, the Secretary General of Uganda Joint Christian Council. And that way we've won the trust and the authority from them to be able to work with their sub-national structures. And in each district, we have what we call interfaith committees. They are not very parallel from what the Interreligious Council has, but these are kind of interfaith with focus on family planning and reproductive health. And we get a coordinator in each district. We don't have enough resources to get human resources in that district. So these champions are the ones that engage through their coordinator with the decision makers. And most of the activities are done. We only do capacity building, document, and keep them engaged, provide the facts and the evidence. So interfaith approach has been very core and is more sustainable. And having the authority of the eminent religious leaders as champions, that has been very, very core. The other very key is the multi-sectoral engagement. Faith for Family Health Initiative, and which now is the trend of the faith in Uganda, we don't work in silos. You will not find a dialogue with religious leaders. We only have them for planning through the Interfaith Alliance for Family Planning, which was formed with support from FP 2020 through UN Foundation. But beyond that engagement, we work with other actors. Even the district costed implementation plans I talked about, the dialogues we've held, they are held with civil society organizations. We have cultural leaders actually at the district who are also working with the interfaith religious leaders. The government, I'm sure some of them are here. I'm seeing messages on the different forums. We have the government, most senior representation of the Ministry of Health here. We have the CSOs, they are here. And so in a way, it has not been a journey of the faith leaders. We've had to integrate and work together for a common cause, and then lead me to the next best practice, that is alliance building for collective action. So we have different platforms. For example, for family planning in Uganda, we have the Uganda Budget, Family Planning Budget Advocacy Group. Diana is here, who was part of the formation. And when they're engaging, it's not only the faith. If we have resources, our work is to make sure that our champions are there to join other advocates, and we come up for the common goal. We have many others, the Ramna Coalition, the Uganda Family Planning Consortia. So we work together, but even when it's interfaith-led, we have to get the decision makers in the room, the politicians that I talked about, the political caucuses in the room. We have to get the CSOs, and we plan together and we move together. So alliance building for collective action has been core and has made us achieve. And sometimes we pull resources. When we have resources and they are not adequate, another one will come in and another CSO will come in and say, I have a budget to fill in this. And so at the end of the day, we've been able to integrate, and religious leaders now no longer feel that fear they had, that they don't want to work with secular organizations in family planning and reproductive health, they are free to the extent that they don't have to be representing Interreligious Council of Uganda or 3FHI, but partners who have engagements can work with them as champions. The other one is what I talked about, the champion building. There's capacity building, but champion building is intentional. Where we have people, religious leaders, cultural leaders, the politicians. When I talked about the family planning political caucus, those are now politicians who are family planning champions. Religious leaders from eminent to the lowest structures who are family planning champions. We have cultural leaders, especially in the 11 districts, who are family planning champions. So we have the youth. So that way, we are building a momentum of people who are able to engage and wherever they are to make sure that aspects, that it be financing, policy, programming, service delivery aspects advanced. So those are some of the very core ones that we've used, and we really appreciate all those Uganda actors who are online. We take this advantage, our champions so on this online, we take advantage of this to say thank you. This is not only the achievement of the faith community, but the collaboration through the mass-sector engagement, through champion building, through alliance building that we've been able to achieve. Thank you.
Excellent, Jackie. Thank you for sharing that information. Yes, thank you, Jackie. So I have one more question for the whole panel that I would like everyone to touch on, and I think you'll be prepared to probably address it concisely, and then we'll go to questions, take questions from the participants to this webinar. And that question is, please share your best kept secret for meaningful faith engagement in family planning. And shall we start with Howard? What's your best kept secret, Howard? Howard, are you there? Or maybe you're mute. Have you? Okay. Then I will turn instead to James. James, if you could turn on your video and tell us what's your best kept secret?
Thank you very much. Again, I will not turn on my video because of the phone connection. Yeah, but the best kept secret that I can share with you here for sustaining meaningful faith engagement is, I would say, acknowledging the contribution of faith-based organizations in these initiatives, whether big or small. That acknowledgement goes a long way. And with that also drawing them to venture together into new grounds, such as advocacy for family planning or any issues that may not be familiar to them at the moment or at the time of engagement. It is possible for people to learn and to see whether they can do something in anything that comes their way. And working with that in mind, also making sure that approaches are highly participatory and consultative, as I said initially. And I want to use some data from Tanzania, very current data from 2021. Here in Tanzania, faith-based organizations are the largest providers of hospitals or hospital services. They are owning 41.1% of all the hospitals. And these hospitals include national and regional referral hospitals recognized by the government and accredited, but also designated district hospitals, which the government uses as district hospitals because they are accredited and they qualify, they meet all the standards, and many highly reputable health centers and dispensaries in the country where people like to go and get services, despite the fact that they charge some fees. And so you can see how influential these faith-based organizations are. In addition to that, they are the second largest provider of health services because they own 23.3% of total health infrastructure. So they have experts and they have a long record of operations spanning centuries that make them well informed in various issues and have a lot of networks. And let's also keep in mind that most of these religious bodies are global. So they have connections worldwide and they share knowledge and experience with others across the world. They have numerous health training institutions, which include fully fledged universities, research entities, and many other active parachurch organizations that we know are even involved in this sector of reproductive health. So in fact, they are very critical players and are well represented in every sector. And finally, we have to remember that they are highly trusted and their influence goes beyond their pulpits, congregations, denominations, and nations. So this acknowledgement can really make us know that when we are approaching them, we are approaching partners that can be really trusted, that can take issues seriously, and that can work along with us despite their differences in views and sometimes there are different values that they hold that sometimes not the same with those held by secular actors. Thank you very much. That I think is the best kept secret I wanted to share.
Okay, participants, you heard of these secrets here. Next, Howard, are you there by chance? We tried to reach you earlier and it's not there. Are you?
Yeah.
Okay, super.
Yes, I am, but can you repeat the question?
Yes, I will. The question is, what is your best kept secret for meaningful faith engagement in family planning?
The best secret would be removing the religious boundaries on issues of health. So in Malawi, all the religious groups, Episcopal Conference of Malawi for the and the Malawi Council of Churches and the Muslim, we have got two Muslim mother bodies, Kaderia Muslim Association of Malawi and Muslim Association of Malawi. When we are implementing health issues, really the issue of the religion is put behind, and that's the secret. So it may happen that in one district, it is only one religious group, for instance, the Evangelical Association of Malawi, and the beneficiaries and the targets will not only be and are not only the ones that are affiliated to EAM. Every member from any religious group is targeted and is involved and is part from the beginning of planning to implementation, monitoring, including reporting. So really the boundaries of a region when it comes to access and the improvement of delivery of sexual and reproductive health, but also other health services is not an issue so long as we come together and agree how we use the strategies on how to reach the masses that want to. The other secret is that the faith community in Malawi is more available in the rural areas. So there's so much part of Malawi which is hard to reach, and those are the health services by working together. So we are not limited to the places where that are easily reachable, that have got a comfort, but really wherever the population that needs the services are, the faith community is there. So we work together, but also we work everywhere, including places where are hard to reach and very remote areas. So I think those are really what I could mention as the secrets of the success of the health reproductive services and issues that we are working on.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And Jackie, I'm going to give you the last word on this question. What's your best kept secret?
Thank you so much. There are two. One is just like Reverend James said, religious leaders are available from the top national level to subnational. The secret is not even a secret, but it's an emphasis that they need to ensure that we package the information in appropriate language and we provide information because they have other tasks. So being able to provide them the information, how we need to engage, how they need to engage with the decision makers, the information that needs to go to the community is very, very important. The other one is an example of mutual trust. In Uganda, one of the best practices that I didn't mention is media engagement. We've had to train media here how to work with the religious leaders because there was mistrust. The religious leaders didn't trust media, and media didn't also understand how to report. So they would pick the most alarming issues, and that would push them, push the religious leaders away from making statements and engaging. So we've been able to do that, and now they work together. And then mutual accountability, very, very key. And that's why in Uganda now we are talking about shifting the paradigm. We've shifted the paradigm from family planning advocacy to accountability. And this accountability is mutual for all of us. And finally, this is repeating what the title is about as a secret, meaningful engagement. This morning I had a discussion with one of the eminent religious leaders and was telling me, why did they invite me in that meeting for 2 days and they did not even give me space to say anything? I just sat like any other participant, and yet they had trained me as a champion. I came as a champion with a lot of knowledge to often participate. So that way is emphasizing and unpacking what meaningful engagement of religious leaders look like beyond what is documented. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Jackie. And I can understand why someone who's gone through that training and capacity building and has all the learning from the working with the partners might feel a bit devalued if they're invited without given a chance to speak. I can understand that, absolutely. So now, would any of the panelists like to react to something another member of the panel said? If there was something someone said that you had a different experience with, or you disagree with, or something that you would underscore that maybe they said in a way that you would have said if you thought of it, let me know what you think. Raise your hand or just unmute your mic if you want to respond. Oh, okay. Let's see. I can't tell actually if any of our speakers have raised their hands. So we'll go then to the questions from the audience, and a number of the participants have submitted questions through the chat. Thank you for that. I have quite a few. So let me start with a question for Sheila, which is, how are you addressing the challenge of adequate supply of contraceptives to meet the overwhelming demand in Kenya? Sheila, would you like to say a few words about that?
Yes, I'll definitely answer that. In Kenya, the Ministry of Health leads a process through a working group that's called the Contraceptive Commodities Logistics Working Group, that comprises not just Ministry of Health, but development partners. And the process is that every year they go through forecasting and quantification to know the amount of contraceptives and under the different methods that will be needed for the country. And they also take into consideration how much storage of commodities they would like to have in the subnational and in the national level at KEMSA. And then subsequently, the government will plan to procure a significant part of those, and the other development partners like UNFPA or USAID or even Bill and Melinda Gates then also make their pledges on what they will procure. When these commodities are then procured and brought to KEMSA, they're distributed to the counties as the need arises. And at the counties, the county leaders also make sure that if there are more commodities of one type in one place and another type needs them, they're redistributed. So it's a very good question, because yes, there's a growing demand each year, which means that the government of Kenya has been putting more and more resources each year and works in this very good partnership. And then of course we have the private sector, where people can pay for the contraceptive commodities, and those are procured by private sectors through the commercial sector. So that's what I'll say in short about that, how they ensure that they get all the contraceptives and try and keep up with the demand. Thank you.
That's great, Sheila, thank you. I see apparently there are a number of hands raised from the audience. I'm not in a position to respond to hands that are raised. If you have a question, please type it into the chat and we will try to address that. Or an intervention, a short intervention. If we have time towards the end, we'll also take short interventions. But I'm going to go to the other questions that have already been introduced to the chat now. And this is a question for all the presenters. And the question is, how do you work with different churches and mosques to make sure that sexual reproductive health messages are in line with their teachings? There was a question related to that, but I'll stop right there and start perhaps with Jackie. How do you work with different churches and mosques to make sure that sexual reproductive health messages are in line with their teachings?
Thank you so much. From the beginning, we have to develop messages with the religious leaders. And that's why I was talking about the language and packaging. So we get these champions come in the room, work with the technical people, try to interpret the reproductive health information, understanding some of the scientific approaches, and they even guide in terms of what is the perspective in terms of the Quran and the Bible. Actually, in most cases, you find they will give you every message you have, they'll give you a relevant Quran, surah for Quran, or a relevant verse from the Bible that is aligned and is talking. So actually, that's the affirmation that shows you that family planning is not an external approach that came in, as people are saying, to control fertility, but it is an issue of quality, and that's how we came up with a language, the quality, spacing, and not the scientific ones like fertility control, because the Bible and the Quran, they are the ones actually who come up and show us. Even the Bible said, Muhammad said this, God said this. And so that way, I'll give you an example. We did know for a long time that the quotation, which it says, go and multiply and subdue the world. For us, we thought it meant you go and fill the world. But when they interpreted for us, subdue has a quality aspect. It says make meaning out of the world. So that's a quality aspect. And then they go on to interpret, to package, and that way those messages are accepted and used in churches and mosques. Thank you. Over to you, Karen. But some of the champions who are online, when they get an opportunity, they can be able to actually say it better than me, how they've been able to do it.
Okay, thank you. Jackie, Howard, would you like to say a word on that question?
Yeah, thank you. I would like to agree with her from the packaging point of view. Packaging of messages on health is very important. In Malawi, the process we go through is that, first of all, we have a technical team that provides the direction of the messages and the target groups, and then bounce them on our religious leaders. So the religious leaders really link those messages to the Bible, but also to Quran and other holy books that various religious groups use. I mentioned over a comprehensive sexuality education guide, which we have developed in Malawi to reach out to the youth in the church and in the mosques. This guide has been developed by the religious leaders, both from the Muslim but also Christian side. There are two, one for the Muslims and one for the Christians. The only difference is that which is from the Christians, the reference scriptures are from the Bible, and the one from the Muslims, the reference scriptures are from the Quran, but developed by the religious leaders, the policymakers in the faith community, and those that have very knowledgeable to help us ensure that we are maintaining the norms and the values and the practices of the church and the Muslims, but at the same time, reaching out to our congregants with sexual and reproductive health. So packaging, working together, and engaging the religious leaders has been one of the practices in Malawi in the development of the programs that we are running.
Okay, thank you, Howard. James, would you like to answer the question, which is just to remind you, how do you work with different churches and mosques to make sure that sexual reproductive health messages are in line with their teachings? Would you like to address that question?
Yes, please. Thank you very much. And I think I can't agree more with my colleagues. That is actually the approach. But let me just clarify and add that now, to make that possible, the engagement needs to give time and also consider the issue of resources. For instance, when we were engaged the Muslim scholars, we had to take time, first of all, to meet with their top leaders, which are the muftis, and inform them or talk to them, discuss with them about the agenda and make them understand. And then they allowed us to meet with the scholars. This needed adequate time, and we in one part, I think in Tanzania mainland, we had to use 2 days where we presented the technical materials on sexual and reproductive health to them, and then we gave them time to look at the scriptures and bring out what they say about each aspect of the topics that we shared with them. So they needed time, they needed to sit at a place where they were, taken away from other responsibilities and needed to be well supported to make sure that they can go through the scriptures that way. And the other thing is that for the Muslim scholars, they do the work, and then after the work of digging into the scriptures and interpreting, they have to submit to their muftis for them to hear, to go through a review and see if they can agree or they can make amendments. And then when it comes to making the declaration, there is a procedure of writing the declarations in their documents and letterheads and making internal approvals that involve other officials. And then the final version is declared by the Mufti himself. And for this, we had to organize meetings, both in Zanzibar and in Tanzania mainland. We had to organize day-long meetings where we brought the media and we brought representatives from all the regions who are Muslim leaders, as well as other stakeholders. And then the Mufti was able to declare, the Muftis were able to declare publicly those fatwas, and the media took and put it in their media channels. So the aspect of resources has to be considered. The aspect of time to get the exercises done thoroughly has to be considered, and collaboration has to be strengthened. Thank you.
Thank you, James, very much for that. I was surprised that I hadn't heard the question of time mentioned already with much emphasis. And from my own experience, it requires a significant investment of time to build the trusting relationships and to allow people in safe spaces to process all that they need to think about and feel and understand before they can move forward on an issue. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that issue. Thank you. Another question we have is also to James, perhaps. How can faith-based organizations engage the government to seriously look into comprehensive sexuality education in order to strengthen SRHR knowledge in a more systematic and sustainable manner for empowering adolescents and youth during school years? Do you want me to repeat the question? Would that be helpful, James?
Please.
Okay. Yeah, it's a long question, so let's try again. How can FBOs, faith-based organizations, engage the government to seriously look into comprehensive sexuality education in order to strengthen SRHR knowledge among youth in a more systematic and sustainable way? Are you there, James? Do you have a response to that? If not, I can ask the other panelists if they have a.
Here I am. Can you hear me?
Super. Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
So let me begin by saying that, first of all, let us take this as a very big opportunity, because governments would like to hear what faith organizations say about issues, and especially sensitive issues like comprehensive sexuality education. I have learned that through experience in Tanzania, sometimes government officials are adamant in making a decision. They hesitate because they want to know what religious leaders think about this and how will they react if such a decision is made. So if faith-based organizations utilize their technical experts and utilize the science that is in existence and the evidence that is available to present issues to government officials, the government officials will, first of all, appreciate very much. And secondly, they will be fast to move. But thirdly, on this sensitive issue, when it is backed by scripture, and it is backed by scripture, it will be very helpful for the government leaders to know that this is not something that is contravening the word of God or faith or the teachings of religions. And so religious leaders with their technical people, they need to package the messages with technical and scientific evidence, as well as with scripture, and present the agenda to government officials. Because particularly in our countries, particularly in Africa, we are informed by, I would say, three sources. From faith, we are informed by the scriptures and the teachings, but we are also informed by cultural practices, which are in some aspects are not consistent. And then we are informed by scientific knowledge, which is modern. So the scriptures are talking about a lot about sexuality or comprehensive sexuality education, even though they don't use that word or that phrase. But talking from, for instance, something that is shared by all religions, the 10 Commandments. One of them talks about do not commit adultery. And what does it talk about? When you go to other parts of the scriptures, they talk about, for instance, rape. They talk about fornication. They talk about people like the King David, who took somebody's wife and ended committing adultery with her and then killing that person. They talk about Solomon having 1,000 women, 700 wives and 300 concubines. But also we have positive teachings in the Song of Solomon or Song of Songs, which talks about romance and love. So actually the scriptures are full of comprehensive sexuality education, and they can be correctly translated, interpreted, and collaborated with evidence, scientific evidence, to push for agendas like comprehensive sexuality education. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. That's super helpful. And I like that you matched evidence with scripture. I agree. That's a key point. A question for Jackie is do you find opposition to the advocacy that you have been, the interfaith advocacy that you've been cultivating? And if so, what do you do to manage this sort of opposition?
Thank you so much. Apparently, because of the my stakeholder and my sectoral engagement approach that we are using, we've been able to neutralize the opposition. Because the opposition would be, for example, coming from politicians, and then we have them already on board as champions. And government has, in a way, become our ally. I'm sure even there are some online that even when they come to engage, they've looked at us as people who are supporting the agenda, helping them to identify issues that will enable us get or achieve the FP 2030 commitments. The other opposition would be religious leaders. We have the trust of the most eminent from the top to subnational. We've gotten the cultural leaders on board. So we've tried, the approach has tried that from the beginning, neutralize the opposition. And sure, in Uganda, I would not call it opposition, but like any other advocacy, we've gotten frustrations. Sometimes not all our asks are answered, or our advocacy yields results. Even when I say, we've been able to get allocations, you find that out of maybe the 20 districts, only 15 are allocating. So there are those who might not prioritize it. So we've not gotten opposition per se in family planning, but of course we've gotten challenges in reproductive health, as James said, especially the comprehensive approach, the CSE, where you know that we've had two policies, that is the adolescent health and this SRHR policy on shelf for a while. I would not call it opposition from religious leaders or resistance. It was not inadequate, but not well-intentioned and informed consultation. They did not consult the custodians of these values, the leaders of these institutions, religious institutions. They picked religious leaders who are not even champions and who looked at some of this. But we worked around that, and the issue was around appropriate access of docents and young people to family planning, appropriate age. At that time, the policy was saying 10, but now it is moving from 14, but the religious leaders are saying as long as they're in union. And then the language, trying to unpack what the rights stand for. So we are advancing, though again, we've met another backlash where they are saying the policy should be incorporated into the national health policy. That's a cabinet instruction. It has nothing to do with the religious leaders or cultural leaders or the politicians. But we know other rights aspects where we've gotten opposition, especially from politicians and religious leaders. And normally those that come along the values and also the culture and religious values that might not be aligned. But all I can say is about engagement. It's about engagement, and when you invite religious leaders in a boardroom, even when interfaith approach works, there are some of these issues where you need to engage one-on-one with different leaders of different institutions to pick their position before you bring them in the boardroom. Appropriate engagement, providing evidence, but also trying to bring everyone on board from the beginning in a way is a key strategy to make sure that opposition and barriers are addressed from the beginning. Thank you. Over to you, Karen.
Thank you very much, Jackie. I have a question for Howard, which is, how have you managed to address gender in your work with religious communities, considering how it impacts the uptake of family planning? I've rephrased the question a bit, but I think that's the main point of the question.
Thank you so much for that question. We must admit that from the leadership top level, more than 80–90% are men. In all other religious groups. But in implementation and managing of the sexual and reproductive health, what we have done is to make deliberate decisions that in every meeting where we are calling religious leaders or any other social group within the churches and the mosques, we have 40 to 50% representation of women. So even when we are doing capacity building of training, providing technical support and others, we ensure that we are bringing in also women and girls so that we are also addressing issues together with the women. It's not really very fruitful to start talking about sexual and reproductive health in the absence of the girls and women. It becomes very fruitful when we have combined in those discussions, dialogues, and trainings the presence of women. So whilst the leadership is more of men in the implementation management of our programs, we have deliberately made a decision to bring in girls and women so that we can go together.
Thank you, Howard.
But I wanted, sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
I wanted also just to, there was a question of a systematic SRH, which was made to James. I wanted to add that we need, as a faith community, realize that our children are being bombarded with different information, and the family and the home is the best school. So once we implement our programs, we must ensure that the parents and the home is really knowledgeable of what is happening. We are building their capacity to talk to their children. Otherwise, if there's going to be a gap between the children and the parents and the homes, then we may not be successfully providing systemic sexual and reproductive health information to our children. So as a faith community, let's accept there's so much which is our children are experiencing, but the home and the home in the congregates is very strong and very important, critical to building the lives of our children.
Thank you, Howard. For both points. On the latter point, on the point about the youth, it's certainly very interesting to think about the fact, to consider the fact that many older religious leaders don't have access to the same information on sexual and reproductive health that the young people do, because sometimes the older religious leaders are not involved in all the social media where the young people are getting information, both good and bad. And that can also contribute to the disconnect. So I'm glad to hear how you're thinking about getting at least their parents informed and involved. I'd like to I have a follow-up question of my own, Howard, on your approach regarding gender. It's absolutely laudable that you are working to try to achieve parity in participation among women and men in your meetings, knowing that that's not representative of how things work in the world at large. So thank you for doing that. My question is, there's a wide body of evidence showing that when women and men are in meetings together, even if they are equal numbers, the men still tend to dominate the discussions. So my question is for you, how do you make sure that the women who are participating have equal voice in those meetings? Have you thought about approaches and techniques to use to ensure that they're not just present, but that they have equal voice?
Thank you so much. There are two strategies that we are using. The first is those that are very critical. We would invite the women on their own and the men on their own, but discuss the same question. But to promote interactions between men and women, what we have done is when we are going into a meeting, would want to have a group discussion to discuss an issue. So for instance, should the faith community be involved in family planning? Now, instead of discussing this question, men and women together, we'll break them. So the women will go into their own groups, the men will go into their own groups, discuss the issue and come back and present. And in most cases, we hear the women responding in a way that they would be expressing their feelings from their experiences in the issues of sexual and reproductive health. The same thing on the men. So I want to agree, when we put the men and women together, the discussions may not be rich. But in the same meeting, when you divide them and let them discuss separately, but come in a plenary and report, it becomes so richful. So these are the two things that we've done. There are other meetings that we call the women together on their own and also men on their own. But in the meetings there, we have the men and women together. We have had, instead of just lecturing, put them in two different groups and discuss the issues.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to turn my attention now to the participants. And I want to say again, thank you so much. It's exciting to see how much active participation there is on this webinar. I'm sorry we've not been able to take live calls. It's just technologically too complicated. But we've taken many of the questions that were submitted by chat. We've not been able to take all of them, but that's a reflection of how enthusiastic you all are to learn more about this. And this is a growing development that I'm very happy to see, having been there a while ago when there wasn't much interest. So continue asking your questions, even though we're wrapping up our call today. Please continue asking these questions of our speakers offline. Maybe you can reach them. Maybe you'll have another opportunity to ask them. We will have a dialogue again in August. So please sign up for that, watch for the announcement, sign up for that and participate in that. And we will try to get all the questions answered, knowing that there are undoubtedly an infinite number of questions in this very challenging and delicate work. So let me just briefly summarize what I heard as some of the main points coming out of today's discussions. In terms of key approaches for this work, for working with faith leaders to advance family planning goals, family planning 2020, family planning 2030 goals, some key approaches are mobilizing youth, working within the faith communities, working interfaith, bringing different faiths together, working at different levels of decision-making in countries, different levels within the religious communities, but also different levels within among government decision makers, from national to district level, county in the places where that's appropriate, engaging widely with a wide range of participants and engaging meaningfully, not tokenistically, so that the people that you're working with know that you value what they bring to the table. The knowledge and experience that they bring may be different than yours, but show that you honor where they're coming from and create safe spaces, investing the time that's necessary for each stakeholder to have the opportunity to learn and grow in a safe context where they don't fear judgment for where they come to the table. Use existing structures for interfaith work, where there are interfaith councils or umbrella organizations within one faith. A big challenge is time and resources. More money, frankly, is needed in order to continue this work. And those who are willing to provide funding for this sort of work need to understand that it takes a long time. You can't expect to drop a few quarters in and have the cash machine ring with all the bells ringing. It takes a long time to build the trust, to make sure you have the knowledge, that you're meeting people where they come, where they arrive to the table, that you engage with them meaningfully, you get a wide range of important participants on board to produce the results and the impact that you have. Yes, also alliance building and champion building was addressed. Making sure that those who participate in the actions are acknowledged for their contributions to the work. Work within a framework of mutual accountability, so that not only is everyone acknowledged and appreciated for their contribution, but they're also held accountable for their responsibilities and for the commitments that they make. Work to match scientific evidence with scripture and use language that is appropriate for bringing those two together. And then, of course, last but by no means least, making sure that women are actively and meaningfully involved helps counter the imbalance of their lack of representation at high levels in most religions. So with this, again, I thank you all very much. I am thrilled that you're here. I want to thank our speakers. The work that you're doing is very much appreciated by many, those you know and those you don't know. Thank you again to FB 2030 for bringing this webinar together. Thank you, Dr. Macharia, for setting the stage for this discussion, for providing context that's been super helpful for the discussion. And I would like to ask everyone, again, stay tuned for information about the webinar in August, and we hope to see you again then. With that, I will say goodbye. Thank you.